The Peacemaker Season 2 finale is almost here, but what does it mean for the future of the DCU? Hello and welcome back to another episode of Strong Collectors Comics. My name is Jordan and I'm joined today by a special guest, Jacob, who had joined us previously on a wonderful talk about Batman and his place in the DCU. If he even needs to be there, you can go ahead and hop back and check that one out if you haven't seen it yet. But the Peacemaker finale is approaching, and even if you see this after the Peacemaker finale, I think it'll be worth watching, folks, because we're going to be talking a little bit about our thoughts on Peacemaker, what might be coming, but also what the DCU might look like moving forward with the DCU shows that we've been seeing here. So as of recording right now, the seventh, second to last, the penultimate is the term I've been finding out, is the term for this episode that we just saw. So spoiler alert, folks, if you haven't seen Peacemaker Season 2, get caught up, put this on pause, go watch it and come back. But we're going to let you know, Jacob, how are we feeling about the season thus far, some of the things we just saw, and some reactions to that.
Man, the penultimate episode 7, that is just so much has happened. And I'd heard from some people that this season was a little bit slower to them compared to the first, but I just felt like the build to this, climactic episode, it's been perfect for me so far. And my expectations coming into a Peacemaker show, obviously after watching the first season,
Right, because you kind of jumped on recently, Jacob, right? You hadn't seen the first
that's right.
season when it came out. You've watched it fairly recently to get caught up for
hmm
this season.
Yeah, I kind of watched it as there was a lot of hype coming out.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, not too long after Superman, they kind of started talking about the season 2 tying into the DCU, and just being such a big fan of the DCU so far, I've just wanted to get caught up to speed. And so, my perspective, having watched the Suicide Squad movie, that's my only real exposure to Peacemaker as a character.
Mm-hmm.
My bar was pretty low, but I have to say the second season has just blown me away for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you've been sucked in to the Peacemaker narrative. What do you think has kind of pulled? I mean, I guess in the first season compared to this one, are there more things that have pulled you in with this season? What have you noticed about what they've been doing as we've been
I
getting into
just
this
think
one?
Chris's, character development, Peacemaker as a character, and just like all that they've done to build him up and make you feel, they did a lot in season 1 about establishing his relationship with his father, and just a lot of these elements of his character that, you feel for, but I feel like they just really dialed that up a notch when he's able to go into this
Mm-hmm.
alternate dimension where he has this perfect life, he has his brother, and, you know, it just really shows that feeling of like, he's longing for this, he's missing this.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just really complex for a character
Mm-hmm.
that in Suicide Squad, he was literally the butt of the joke for everything. And like, you could not, I mean, that's the line from Rick Flag Jr., like Peacemaker, what a joke.
What a joke.
And to just take that and run with it, it's a masterpiece for sure.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that's been really cool to see. Because even for me, yeah, it's like I think even when they announced the Peacemaker show, I'm like, do we need to do this? Is this really something that's worth our time or anybody's asking for? But yeah, I think seeing what they've done with his character, and I'd be curious to hear from folks in the comments who's watching this what you think. But I agree with you. I think the emotional hook, I think, is much more there in this season, even in the first season. I think that whole premise of this world where his dad's alive, his brother's alive, there's these much different dynamics that he gets to have. But I think treating that like, yeah, in a pretty serious way that has some emotion to it, but also plays with a lot of absurdity and some some goofiness as you go. So one thing I will say, I'm a little surprised at the escape from the alternate dimension. I've liked the way he's been using the alternate world, and I think it's already to me working a little better than the MCU did with
hmm
the multiverse stuff, where it feels very crucial to the story, but also not so big that it's like none of the other stories matter. It feels like a kind of a closed loop. So I think a lot of people going into this episode were anticipating the last two episodes being like a two-parter, like you're stuck in this world. I think you and I were having some private conversations. Is G.I. Robot going to show up and like help him wage the war in this alternate world, or maybe G.I. Robot is on the other side in this world, and you see that.
Right.
I'm wondering, I mean, I almost feel like at this point, at the end of this episode, we're kind of done more or less with that alternate world. I mean, maybe you have the threat of Keith, maybe coming back around or finding some way back. But I almost wonder if that's like a tease for even the deep future. Like maybe you're not going to see that come back around in the finale, but he could come back later. I mean, I guess were you surprised at them getting back to the main world? B, where do you see it going? Or C, is Keith going to come back? What do you feel with, I guess, all that stuff at this point?
I could definitely see, them laying the groundwork, and Hardcore looks at Keith, and that's kind of the closing, minutes of the episode. She's maybe about to make sure we don't have Keith come back in an eighth episode, but
Mm-hmm.
I just feel like they did kind of lay that groundwork. So in my mind, I think he's maybe going to come back and
Okay.
and kind of find a way into their dimension and
Mm-hmm.
see how that goes. But no, I definitely agree. Like, I was not expecting them to wrap this up quite as quickly as they did. And, just with how James Gunn has been talking about episode 6 and 8, it definitely felt like, more was going to happen with both of those. But I think if you kind of look back at what he says, it is a lot more about like that character development and that,
Mm-hmm.
so I look for a lot of more closure, surrounding Chris's character, Chris and Hardcore. I
Mm-hmm.
think that we're going to see a lot with that. But I think episode 7 was where you see kind of the meat and potatoes of like the action and the climax of the alternate dimension story. So
Yeah, kind of the emotional thread. And I thought that was a powerful moment too, where he's saying, it's not your world that's messed up or my world, it's me. Like I'm kind of the one who is messed up, and you're
mhm,
seeing a lot of his trauma and the flashbacks of his life and these different things. And I do think I liked the more nuanced with his dad, who's like, I'm not okay with this world. I'm trying to do what I can in it, but I'm not
mhm,
like part of this system, or I'm not part of the bad regime or whatever. I'm just a guy who lives in this world. So I
right.
thought that was a cool. I think we were talking about that a little bit before, but I think a cool take. And I guess I'm
Absolutely.
wondering, yeah, would it be shifting more to the Rick Flag Peacemaker conflict? Kind of more grounding it in the main, because I feel like, I mean, most of these episodes are 35 to 45 minutes, unless, I mean, maybe the last one will be a supersized Peacemaker finale, but I feel like that would be a lot to fit in, like the resolution of that, the other world
Right.
coming in. I guess, I mean, James Gunn has had made some comments. I think we talked about this where he said, like, there's a whole lot of surprises, some cool stuff in the finale. He said, even for the comic nerd, or like for the comic nerds, basically, like, oh, there's some really cool stuff coming, which I think kind of gets our minds racing as far as what that might mean. I don't know.
Yeah,
Do you got any
definitely. I
thoughts on that?
think, let me think. I'm thinking that, there's still definitely a lot to see with Argus getting their hands on that
Mm-hmm.
technology. And, we know just from the announcements with Man of Tomorrow and that this is going to heavily tie into that. So they may
Mm-hmm.
be kind of saying, okay, books closed on this, emotional journey and this journey with the alternate dimensions, but
Mm-hmm.
maybe we're kind of bringing it back to Earth and seeing how the consequences of this journey kind of plays into the larger picture of the DCU.
Yeah, yeah. I do think he's had some comments about the importance of the Rick Flag, Lex Luthor kind of relationship playing out.
Hmm.
I'm not so sure if we'll see Lex again necessarily, but I think that kind of leads to a bigger point we were having a conversation about, where you said you had liked the idea that in this show it's like if you watch it, you kind of appreciate it. It maybe pays off some stuff, but it's not like required reading or homework. Like you could probably tune in to Man of Tomorrow and see Lex Luthor is free or he's working with the government, and you're probably like, okay, something happened. If you watch this show, you see, oh, Rick Flag was working with him, maybe getting a little out of his element, over his head. I'm sure Lex has a bigger game that he's working, and sort of contrasting that with the MCU approach, where a lot of the MCU movies or shows have been like, you got to watch this because it's setting up the next
Mhm.
movie or it's setting up the next character. And if you tune in, I don't know, Multiverse of Madness, you'd be like, why is Wanda here? What happened? Where was she at before? How on earth did we get to this point? Which I guess I do think that's an interesting idea to think about the approach for DCU television versus MCU.
Yeah, I think it really speaks to just this like lived in feeling of the DCU where there's so much going on in so many different corners and so many groups that you could follow that, there's going to be
Mm-hmm.
some overlap and that's going to, the Creature Commando fans are going to hear Rick Flag Sr. saying he's going down to Belle Reve and maybe going to pick up who's he going to visit,
Mm-hmm.
and but I think, yeah, like it's definitely going to tie into more of that DCU lived in
Mm-hmm.
feeling of that world.
Yeah, so like adding to it without being like this is required watching. And I think picking a character like Peacemaker is great for that because it gives him the freedom to create what he wants. And also, I mean, what I've been struck by with this show is how low budget it probably has to be. I mean, you're
Oh,
probably
for
spending
sure.
next to nothing because I mean, there's the cast, there's some action, some CG, but I mean, I'm sure Warner Brothers or whatever the company parent company is who's paying the bills is very happy because this show is probably like, yeah, this is next to nothing compared to like
Yeah,
other
and
shows.
in episode 7, we see the the trio come down, really the
Hmm.
Aggie and
Yeah,
Keith just blowing up this whole squadron
yeah,
of police cars and stuff. And I was like, wow, I feel like that's maybe the first time I've seen them use like really, maybe expensive or really just a lot of special effects. So
hmm, like keeping it
it can't have
within.
cost
Yeah,
too much. It's very like character driven, very
hmm,
story driven for sure.
yeah, and I think James Gunn, I think having worked in Marvel has the mindset of that, like how much things actually cost. What studios look for and like what they'll greenlight, or like how much of a low budget you want to get away with more creative stuff. Like you can get away with more creative freedom if you're not spending millions and millions of dollars. Maybe you get more of a leeway. And I think I've noticed that feels like a pretty cool approach with this show. And I think even as we're looking forward, like Lanterns, that is going to be very much, it's a Green Lantern show, but I think it's a smart decision that it's going to be very Earth based. And it's almost like,
Hmm.
it feels like they're kind of almost in like plain street clothes from what we've seen. When they whip out the rings, it's like, okay, we mean business, but the whole show isn't, well, we're in deep space and we're exploring all this stuff. And it's every episode is $5 million, probably, or whatever that might, millions and millions of dollars to do all
Right.
the effects and stuff.
Yeah, it's definitely you got to walk before you can run with something like that, and I definitely hope to see, more of that lantern explored, but just finding that balance to start and that, we're doing a show and we're kind of building these characters up and yeah, just what we've seen with Peacemaker, I'm really excited to see,
Hmm.
other shows and specifically Green Lanterns for sure.
Yeah. A focal point, of course, of this season of Peacemaker has been the multiverse, right? We have the multiversal door, these other things that are going on. I do think it's interesting that we're starting pretty early on with the multiverse in the DCU, whereas the multiverse in the MCU was very much a culminating point, right? We were in the universe for probably, I don't know what, 15 ish years before we got to the multiverse. And a lot of people would say that kind of screwed up the MCU in a way. So I guess what do you feel about how this show in general has maybe been setting the tone, or maybe doing something different for how the multiverse will be handled, and how that might inform future DCU projects?
Yeah, absolutely. It does feel very different between these two, entities. Like with Marvel, it always feels like they're like, releasing an event or it's, like you said, it's the culmination. It's like kind
Mm-hmm.
of you look at it, it's the direction moving forward. Oh, look at all the stories that we can tell within the multiverse. Whereas with DCU, I feel like it's it's a lot more, it speaks to that kind of lived in quality of the
Hmm.
universe where it's like, multiversal
Yeah.
science, it's been around,
It's part of life.
it's
Well,
just like metahumans and everything else.
I've always thought of the DC as kind of owning more of the multiverse idea. I mean, have you kind of felt that way? I mean, I feel like even growing up reading comics, it would be like Infinite Crisis or whatever, or Crisis on Infinite Earths,
Yeah, for
whatever it
sure.
was. Like Marvel would dabble in the multiverse, but DC felt like they embraced that a lot more, and that was kind of more of a common theme.
Yeah, definitely. I think that that's as it's true in comics, it's also true in the different cinematic universes for sure.
Hmm.
That's kind of their approach where DC, yeah, it just feels like it's just kind of, oh yeah, that's just Tuesday. You go to another dimension and you
You
never know what's gonna come of that.
find
But
your alternate self. Well, yeah, and I think that's what I've liked about this season is like the multiversal. It was almost more finding the like human or the funny in it. A vigilante like I'd love to go look myself up, and he like goes up on
right.
his own. And they're like, "What are you doing, dude?"
Oh
But
my gosh. One of my favorite parts of the episode 6 and 7, really, but
yeah, it's not like it's earth shattering. It's just like, well, this could happen, but it doesn't like undermine the importance of like our main characters, like our leads. We still care about them. It's not like, oh well, there's a million multiverses, so who cares? Because any Peacemaker could show up at any time and replace this guy. You're like, kind of, but not really. Like it's
mhm.
still about. And I think that's what James Gunn always has a good pulse on, whether it was Guardians, whether it's been this, is like the heart of the characters or the heart of the storytelling, and not letting this larger than life comic booky stuff, like still doing comic booky stuff, but not letting that kind of get in the way of character or story or what's important.
He's really good at like leaving these kind of like crumbs around almost, you know what I mean? Where it's
Mhm.
like it's almost, innocuous and people don't really like look into these certain details too much. Like, Eagly is a good example, or the dimensions from season one, or the portal door, I mean,
Yeah,
where it's like it's just there, you know what
right.
I mean? And he's not going to dwell on it too much, but looking back and writing the next thing, you have all these threads that you could
Hmm.
go look at, and you could have Eagly be this,
Like the Great
the
Eagle or whatever.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
You can expand on that stuff, and even when you expand on it, it doesn't have to like actually culminate. I'm sure that's the last we see of this
the
this
Eagle
great
Hunter.
eagle, or maybe not,
Yeah, maybe that
and
comes
and
back
that's the
later.
beauty of it
Uh huh.
for
Which I
sure.
I think feels very comic booky. Like maybe there's something small and it doesn't seem important, but later it can come back around and be something much bigger or much more important. Which I think speaks to the nature of the Peacemaker character, right? Like you saw him in Suicide Squad and you're
Mhm.
like, yeah, he's funny, he's humorous, he'll kill anybody to make peace happen. But he's like, well, what would it be like to be that guy? Or like, what would it be like to really like think about the psychology of that guy? And then if he
Right.
tried to have friends and be happy, it's like, I think to me has been a pretty delightful journey and a lot of fun. And I think we both appreciate how it's not been like taken so seriously. Like it's an important part of the world, but it's not like, well, this is the biggest thing ever because I set it
Right.
off and you better tune in.
And he's probably not gonna join the Justice Gang and be part of these, big team up events. Hey, maybe that's a good question. What do you think happens to Peacemaker at the end of all of this?
Ooh, that's a good
Do
question.
you
I
think he
mean,
lives to see the end of season 2?
I think he's gonna live. I mean, I think we'll see maybe one of those like kind of Loki season 2-ish endings where like everyone's kind of set up in a way where they're doing their thing. Maybe they're instated in some way, but if they need to get brought back, they can. For me, that would be kind of my thought.
And I only ask just because anytime you see these characters get to this like, this level of emotional catharsis, and like they've reached the end of that kind of character development, and maybe there is somewhere to go from here for sure.
Hmm.
I don't know what that thread would be, but it just feels like, he has learned enough and has developed enough as a character that it
Hmm.
could be a satisfying end as well.
Yeah, and you kind of leave him there if you need to bring him back. Maybe it can. I think I'd like at least one Creature Commando cameo, Jacob. I wanted G.I. Robot. Maybe I'm asking too much. But, I mean, I think even seeing, like, David Harbour show up in Frankenstein makeup would be an example of, like, that would be so cool. I'd be like, or even The Bride, you know, like, just one person, and you're like, okay, that's pretty cool, actually.
No, I totally agree. And even just when I was watching Creature Commando, I was like, man, I really hope they bring them into live action, some kind of tie-in, some kind of crossover.
Or,
And they're still there. They're just hanging out.
okay, here's the pitch. So remember Creature Commandos, they end up kind of all back incarcerated, right? Peacemaker's incarcerated. You see him join the, like,
Oh,
holding cell with Big GI. You know, like, you don't
and
see him
now
as
he's the Creature
characters, but it's
Commando.
just a moment of him, like, what the heck is going on here? He's with all the creature, you know, and then that would be a fun, like, oh, Peacemaker with the Creature Commandos as,
Right.
like, maybe it's animated, maybe it, who knows where it'll go, but that's out there in the world. That's my, I'm
That's
putting
where he
my,
goes from
I'm putting
here.
my chip on that. Don't know if it'll happen,
I
but I
think
hope it
that's a pretty
does.
good one. If it doesn't happen, you should write into James Gunn and say, hey, let's make this happen.
At least send him a tweet, an X. I'll X him.
An X.
Okay.
Nice. Yeah, I would love to see that for sure.
Those are some of our thoughts, folks, on the Peacemaker finale and how that informs the future of the DCU. Let us know in the comments what you're thinking, what you've been enjoying, what you're looking forward to. Please be liking, sharing, and subscribing. And until next time, as always, stay strong.